Coming up on The World Today. World leaders attend Global Education Summit in London, pledge support for universal education. Israel investigates shooting of Palestinian boy in the West Bank. And Tunisia President sacks head of state television, deep in the country's political crisis. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Joke Rogers. We begin with the Global Education Summit, where Nobel Peace Prize laureate Malala Yousafzai and the World Health Organization's Director General have urged countries to commit funds to improving education in developing countries, especially for girls. The Global Partnership of Education GPE Global Summit, co-hosted by the governments of the United Kingdom and Kenya in London, put the target at $4 billion. British Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab says that the funds would be the lion's share of the $5 billion needed by the GPE to reach targets that would see 40 million more girls getting 12 years at school and 20 million more girls literate by the age of 10. Let's take a listen to some of the comments so far.
Children are among those least at risk of severe disease or death from COVID-19. But the pandemic has hit the world's children hard in other ways. More than half the world's students have been affected by prolonged school closures and other disruptions to education. This has magnified inequities for already marginalized children, especially girls. Some children have been out of school for more than 9 months, increasing their risk of dropping out of education completely, jeopardizing their future employment prospects and their health. In this time of global crisis, coordinated investment in education is critical to provide a safe environment for children's education, health, well-being, and nutrition. That's why the safe reopening of schools is a priority for WHO.
We cannot achieve development and growth as a society without the educational empowerment of 50% of our population. The Somalia government is committed to ensuring the equitable access to quality education of our girls. When you educate a girl, you educate a whole society.
President Muhammadu Buhari has joined other world leaders at that summit taking place in London. The summit seeks to provide opportunity to leaders to make 5-year pledges to support efforts to help transform education systems in up to 90 countries and territories around the world. As part of his commitment to improving education in the country, the president has pledged to increase the budget for the sector by as much as 50% over the next 2 years. Meantime, the Minister for State for Education, Chukwuemeka Wajuba, who is one of the top government officials on the president's entourage, says Nigeria stands to get about $120 million from the summit.
GP has been around for the past almost 2 decades. Right. Now, this is the third or fourth tranche of allocations that are going to be made. The push today is the Prime Minister of Britain and the President of Kenya reaching out for a fundraising and to put nearly $5 billion into a plate. Now, the GPE itself, which is the Global Partnership for Education, seeks to address the gaps in education fulfillment for everybody around the world. Now, Nigeria is a partner country. We're not a donor country. So if you're a partner country, your first response will be to listen carefully to what is being raised. But if you're a partner country, your first response will be make yourself available to get as much as a chunk of what it is. Throughout all the meetings we've had Tuesday and Wednesday, we've now gotten a commitment that seems like Nigeria will walk away with nearly $120 million that we'll then negotiate how we can use them, especially targeting the states that are most vulnerable, because there are large areas in the country where a lot of impact hasn't been made, and we're here. I'm not sure whether all the countries will be happy that we are walking away with that. Everybody believes that Nigeria is an oil state, and if we could, but we also try to explain that it's part of the fact that Nigeria is an oil producing country. Its debt servicing ratios are very, very high. To build infrastructure across big swaths of country like this is a very, very high estimate. The security challenges are very, very, very high. A lot of our people that we've already trained are not in the country. They are in diaspora servicing everybody else in the world except Nigeria. They're working everywhere. So it's really, Nigeria is challenged by all kinds of factors, and we've impressed upon them they need to engage and stay engaged with Nigeria.
Our London correspondent Juliana Olayinka joins us now for an update. Juliana, it's nice to see you again. It's been a long day, I expect. You've been going up and down at the summit venue, trying to get all the information that you can. So give us an idea of what's gone on so far, who has spoken so far, and when do we expect President Buhari to speak, if he hasn't done so already?
Thank you, Joke. Good afternoon. From a different location, they're kind of pushing everybody out now because it has been an absolutely monumental day, all focusing on education, focusing on children who, like I said previously, they have actually been the hidden victims of the pandemic. We heard from the UN Secretary General, who said that so much work had been done, particularly in Africa, in the build-up to the pandemic. And then, of course, because of so many of the lockdowns, lots of the work that had been done to make sure that everybody, particularly the girl child, which has been a major focus of attention today, lots of that was lost. So what the Global Partnership for Education are doing is using this occasion to end a pretty lucrative campaign called the Raise Your Hand campaign. So many famous faces were involved in that, including former footballer Didier Drogba. And the aim was to raise £5 billion. Now, it's just wrapped up, and before the end of that summit, former Australian Prime Minister Julia Gillard, who we can just see now standing with President Muhammadu Buhari, she said $4 billion has been raised, which is absolutely fantastic. And what we do hope is that there can be accountability and transparency amongst these African leaders. So not just here as saying you're going to do all of these things, but actually making sure that it's done, which is the most important thing.
Right, so Juliana, the money is good. $5 billion, $4 has been raised already, but is it just about the money? We just heard that the Nigeria's Minister of State for Education saying that Nigeria will get 120 million from that summit. But is it all about the money? I mean, what do we expect in terms of infrastructure? What does the summit expect these African leaders and other beneficiaries to do with all that money? What kind of infrastructure are expected to be put in place?
See, that's a really good question. And that was a question I put to Alice Albright. Hopefully we'll be hearing that in one of our news tracks later on this evening. But I did ask the chair, I said, look, yes, it's all about the money. And yes, lots of people are promising to do lots of things. But how can you ensure that this is trickled down? And I think that's where lots of these discussions are taking place behind the scenes. We spoke about President Muhammadu Buhari, who I know had quite a few bilateral discussions just behind me earlier today. I know that he was speaking to Prime Minister Boris Johnson. He was speaking to Baroness Scotland, the Commonwealth Secretary General, and of course he was speaking to other African leaders. There are challenges. I think they were pretty honest about that. With Nigeria, of course, insecurity is a major issue. Kidnapping for ransom challenges, and of course the fact that so many children are out of school. In fact, obviously Nigeria has the most children out of school in the entire world. So yes, I think lots of discussions are going to be taking place back home. I know they're going to have to speak to each and every individual state governor to find out what their needs are. There are some states that obviously have a much higher needs than others. But I think, a lot of this was about the pomp and ceremony, of course. You can see that with the flashing images and all of the big stellar names that we had speaking on stage. I think the real discussion, the meat and bone is going to take place when these leaders get back home and they can address some of these challenges and make sure that it does get trickled down to the places that need it. And very lastly, Joke, before I'll let you go, they did speak about a lot of advocacy groups, a lot of the smaller groups that are not here, local governors, local councillors, and people that are pushing from the private sector, putting lots of pressure on the government. They are fundamental. So yes, we've got the big names here, but it's the local community, the local stakeholders, the parents, the teachers that are fundamental to ensuring that this money does go to exactly the people and the places where it's needed the most.
So much for that update. I did hear that, some participants saying that they would like to see girls especially, benefit mostly from, these donations because a lot of girls are out of school. But thank you for that update. We'll catch up with you much later to get more from that summit.
Thank you, Joke.
Let's switch our attention to health now and the COVID-19 pandemic. As vaccination continues around the world, Israel has announced that it will now offer a third shot of the Pfizer vaccine to people over 60. Here's more on this and other developments on our COVID-19 Global Update.
Israel's health ministry has announced plans to start a coronavirus booster campaign for adults who are over 60 years old and have received their second shot at least 5 months earlier, in the face of the potential risks posed by the vaccine's apparent waning efficacy and the current fourth wave of COVID-19. Dozens of protesters have staged a rally in front of the Japanese Prime Minister's office in Tokyo, calling for the country's leader to cancel the ongoing Olympics due to a recent spike of coronavirus cases. In Tokyo, where pandemic restrictions are mostly voluntary outside the Olympic bubble, daily infections hit a record 3,865. Daily cases nationwide also topped 10,000 for the first time. Over in Russia, the country reported 799 coronavirus-related deaths over the past 24 hours, an all-time high it has reached 3 times in the last month amidst a surge in cases blamed on the infectious Delta variant. The Coronavirus Task Force also confirmed 23,270 new COVID-19 cases in the last 24 hours, including 3,356 in Moscow. Pakistan will ban air travel for anyone without a COVID-19 vaccine certificate from August the 1st and will require all public sector workers to get vaccinated by August the 31st. The government says from August 1, unvaccinated people will no longer be allowed to enter government offices, schools, restaurants, and shopping malls.
And when we come back on World Today, we'll take a look at some other stories, including look at what's going on at the Tokyo Olympics in a moment. Welcome back to the program. In Tunisia, President Kais Saied has dismissed the head of the national television station, Mohamed Lassad Dahek, and appointed a provisional replacement. Earlier, he also sacked a large number of senior government officials. Mr. Saied assumed executive and judicial powers over the weekend after suspending Parliament and removing the Prime Minister. The president's opponents have accused him of staging a coup, but he insists that he acted within his powers at a time of crisis. Tunisia is beset by a crippled economy and surging COVID infections, causing growing international concern. The Israeli military is investigating the death of a 12-year-old Palestinian boy in the occupied West Bank. Palestinian officials say Mohammed al-Alami was shot by, the boy was shot by Israeli soldiers while traveling in a car with his family near Beit Umar on Wednesday. The military adds that troops fired at a car they thought was involved in suspicious activity and failed to stop. They believed it to be the same one as the one from which they had seen remains of a newborn baby being discarded. According to the military, they tried to arrest the car's passengers, calling out and firing into the air, and the car did not stop. One of the soldiers fired at its wheels. Now, the U.S. Senate has approved the advancement of the $1.2 trillion U.S. infrastructure bill that will address the crumbling buildings and roads in America. Our Washington correspondent Maria Bird reports that a roughly $1 trillion bipartisan infrastructure investment bill advanced in the U.S. Senate on Wednesday, passing a key milestone that moves the emerging legislation towards formal debate and possible passage.
The United States Senate reaches an agreement on the U.S. infrastructure bill.
I am amazed that there's some who oppose this just because they think that if you ever get anything done, somehow it's a sign of weakness. Speak to that family in which they're commuting back and forth in order to get their children to school or to get to work, and tell them, oh, you just wait because we want political circumstances to be different. No, we're not going to delay relieving their problem.
We've come together, worked in good faith with our Democrat colleagues. Our Republican leaders, ranking members, and committee members have worked on the elements of this, as have the Democrats on their side. We've done something on a bipartisan basis. It's the way Washington should work. It's the way America expects us to work. And I'm confident that we will be able to get it across the finish line.
President Biden praises the U.S. Congress for voting to advance the bill.
You may have heard that in Washington now, just on the phone, looks like we reached a bipartisan agreement on infrastructure, fancy word for bridges, roads. But when I put my hand in that Bible on January 20th, took the oath of office, I made a commitment to the American people. We're going to change the paradigm so working people could have a fighting chance again, to get a good education, to get a good job and a raise, to take care of that elderly parent and afford to take care of their children, and stop losing hours of their lives stuck in traffic because their streets are crumbling or waiting for slow, spotty internet to connect them to the world. That's what the economy we're building is all about.
The $1.2 trillion infrastructure package will address the failing physical and structural U.S. systems. From Washington, Maria Bird, Channel Television News.
And this week, U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID Administrator Samantha Power helped to kick off the Prosper Africa Build Together campaign at the Corporate Council on Africa's U.S.-Africa Business Summit. The campaign is a targeted effort to elevate and energize the United States' commitment to trade and investment with countries across the African continent under the Biden-Harris administration. The U.S. says it will accomplish these goals by promoting new opportunities for African and American businesses, investors and workers working with African governments and the private sector to strengthen business, enabling environments and investment climates, modernizing and synchronizing U.S. government services to provide businesses with a coordinated support package, and fostering the conditions that will mobilize investment in Africa's infrastructure, consistent with President Biden's Build Back Better World Partnership. National security law and foreign diplomacy experts Johanna LeBlanc joins us now for more on this. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So President Biden has taken a renewed approach in tightening relations with Africa. What do you make of this announcement to advance the Prosper Africa Build Together campaign?
Well, first and foremost, I think it needs to be stated that this program, Prosper Africa, is one of former President Trump's signature programs. And I think that a lot of people don't give him a whole lot of credit for that. So I wanted to be clear that this was indeed a Trump initiative that has continued on under the Biden administration, which I think is great. It's a step in the right direction. I think Biden understands the importance of the African continent. You are talking about a population of roughly 1.2 billion people with an average age of 19 years of age, right? So there is capacity, there is that enthusiasm, there's the workforce. So I think that American companies will take great advantage of this policy to ensure, to foster development across the African continent. But I think what's important here is that I think there is a great deal of opportunity for Africa and countries across the continent to play a critical role in strengthening supply chain for PPEs in response to COVID-19 under the health initiative, as outlined by the secretary, the administrator of USAID, with health being one of the key areas that Prosper Africa will focus on. And also, I think that there is a great deal of opportunity for Africa to increase its exports into the United States. There are a number of goods and services that are available across the African continent that the country could make a great deal of revenue from. For example, under the AGOA program, we look at the exports to Africa is at roughly 261 million, and that was back in 2014. So there is room to increase that, to bring jobs to Africa, and to ensure that Africa is not focusing more on bringing goods to the continent, but instead selling goods to the American economy.
Right, thank you so much for that, Johanna LeBlanc. Thank you for speaking to us on that subject.
Thank you.
Finally, on the program, Tunisia Lee came to Tokyo thinking the best she might do was win an all-round Olympic silver, but the youngest member of the U.S. gymnastics team grabbed the gold after Simone Biles dropped out of the event over mental health concerns. With Biles watching from the front row at the gymnastics center, Lee won the all-round to secure the title for the U.S. for a fifth straight game. On the final rotation, the floor exercise for a 57.433 winning total. Considered heir apparent to Biles, 18-year-old Lee's moment arrived sooner than everybody expected.
Yeah, the past 2 years have been absolutely crazy with COVID and just my family and everything else. This medal definitely means a lot to me because there was a point in time where I wanted to quit and I just didn't think I would ever get here, including injuries and stuff. So there are definitely a lot of emotions, but I'm super proud of myself for sticking with it and believing in myself, because this medal would not be possible without my coaches, the medical team, my parents, and it just is so surreal, and I haven't even let it sink in yet.
A little sinking, quite all right. Congratulations to her. Well, that's it on The World Today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Joker Rogers.